Hello, we're finally on. Yay.
But I think we should probably, momentarily pause and
Really?
banter or something because people have to find us since we had to restart things.
Yeah. So
It,
you don't want to miss stuff. Well, in that case, it's time for Drinky Bird.
yeah.
Come here, Drinky Bird. Let's get some drinking on. You can only see the end of Drinky Bird.
I was gonna say, I think that's kind of
You
not
know
as,
he's up to his business.
not as impressive as you might want it to be.
Well, Drinky Bird doesn't go for impressive. He's just familiar. And he's agreeable. Aren't you, Drinky Bird? See, he's nodding.
Absolutely agreeable. That's true.
And,
Is it a case of toxic positivity? He can't really say no.
It's just Drinky
He's
Bird.
just, well, and Drinky Bird's just accepting of things,
He's
I
not
guess.
particularly toxic. Unless you break them, you can catch yourself on the glass and get that chlorohydrate of whatever it is in there on you. And that wouldn't be good.
Oh, goodness.
It's probably survivable. So here it is, Friday. Let's see, is this the 18th then? I think it's the 18th.
It is the 18th.
By Cracky. That's just what my computer says.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, well, it agrees.
All right.
Sing a little song.
A little song. Treason is the reason for the season. Is that the season is the treason reason? No, that's not it. It's much nicer today. It's been such a swampy week here in Portland. And I'm assuming that we have dithered sufficiently. Shall we cease to dither?
I'm putting up a little tiny notice.
Hard-hitting.
Little tiny notice I'm putting up.
Oh, hard-hitting headlines. Okay. I'll dither a bit more. Well, maybe it's time for the planes around the world.
Perhaps it is.
Drinky Bird, so kind of step things up with a rattling noise. Everybody knows that noise. There we go. We could do a MH370 imitation and make one of them disappear, but that would be imbalanced. How about now?
I think. Hey, I think now.
Okay.
I think now. Because what the heck? Let's just do
show
this
our
thing.
faces instead of our boobs.
Morning.
Good morning. This is now Bridge to a Better World. That's Ani Raven Haynes. I'm Teresa Mitchell. And
lovely to see folks.
I'd like to talk about the news and comment a bit with you. Thanks for joining us. Associated Press says that residents in the capital of Canada's Northwest Territories were rushing to beat a noon Friday deadline to evacuate their homes as one of hundreds of wildfires raging in the territories moved closer to the city of 20,000, the city of Yellowknife, I guess. Thousands fled on Thursday, driving hundreds of miles to safety or waiting in long lines for emergency flights, as the worst fire season on record in Canada showed no signs of easing. And of course, earlier this year, the smoke went into New York and other places where people who have power noticed that the atmosphere was, because the scientific term is fucked up. And I thought, well, that could be, a silver lining there. But it seems that there are still horrific fires in Canada. 10 planes left Yellowknife Thursday with 1,500 passengers. And they hope to have 22 flights leave today with 1,800 more passengers. Fire was within 10 miles of Yellowknife's northern edge yesterday. And winds are blowing, and it looks bad. And, this comes in right after the horror in Hawaii. And speaking of weather, Hurricane Hillary grew rapidly to Category 4 strength off Mexico's Pacific coast. I just checked, and it is affecting Bucerias weather. Now, Puerto Vallarta weather, Bahia Banderas, could reach Southern California as the first tropical storm there in 84 years, causing significant and rare impacts, including extensive flooding. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said Hillary had sustained winds near 145 at 6 a.m. this morning was expected to continue its rapid intensification. Actually, I think I have an update on that. No, I don't. I know that it was getting faster anyway. It's getting stronger last I checked.
Here, I'm going to go ahead and scoot back a little bit so you can scoot in a little bit. Well, no, that's the other
Scoot
way.
in? Okay.
Yeah, because, you know,
All right.
camera and stuff.
I'm in like Flint. It's going to weaken, but it'll still be a hurricane when it approaches the Baja California Peninsula, and it will approach Southern California on Sunday as a tropical storm. So today I decided there's so much going on with so many trials of the former guy in the presidential office that it was time to talk about it. As I asked last week, I'm still wondering, could SCOTUS grifters face impeachment after a landslide Democrat win? And are they wondering that? Are they asking themselves that as they consider whether to intervene in Trump's trials? They haven't shown any sign of doing so far, and historically they haven't, but I want to go over that in a bit more detail. They've got to be smarting from the ongoing public discussion of their substantial corruption. Gorsuch got his debt wiped out anonymously as soon as he got on the court, and he has sold real estate to a Supreme Court litigant. Alito has taken vacations from rich people with cases before the court, and Clarence Thomas is going for the record 38 sumptuous private jet vacations, and of course his wife, Jenny, flogging on to the January 6th insurrectionists. So this is not a good sign for people who are supposed to be above it all and judging things judiciously.
Beyond reproach.
And they just aren't anymore. And I think they might wonder. I mean, there is a possibility. I don't know how strong, since the science of public manipulation, of mind control, and propaganda is so intense and so well developed in the United States that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another close election with people voting Republican because they're just zombies now, I guess. I don't know what excuse you can make for someone who votes Republicans at this point. But it's also possible that enough young people will register and vote that they'll just pretty much crush the Republicans, because they have a very strong rump of, and I use the word advisedly, of fanatic believers. And they are, of course, fanatic because they are so afraid that their white privilege is going to be taken away. John Fritz writes in USA Today, if history is any guide, former President Donald Trump could be holding out for help from the Supreme Court, even if history also suggests he won't get it. As Trump and his allies face a 41-count indictment in Georgia for their role in attempting to overturn the 2020 election, there's a chance the former president will call on the high court to weigh in on a variety of issues in the sprawling case, according to experts. And while the final outcome of those cases is unlikely to be appealed to the Supreme Court, the justices may be asked to decide whether two of the cases should be moved to federal court. And they go on to point out that this is a part of how Trump will try to delay things, because his game is to get into office and then really screw things up, really put the kibosh on attempts to hold him responsible for his crimes. And I think that part of the frenzy that we see on the far right is their awareness that they're in deep, that they have been acting bizarrely and criminally, and they can't afford to be called on it, so they've got to get in power. And there's talk of getting in power by any means, and just screw democracy if they can't get enough votes together. And this has kind of worked for them in a way. I mean, the system is set up for it. It's set up for those who side with the rich and the reactionary. That is what the electoral college is about, and it certainly works rather well to make sure that rich people in thinly populated states have just wildly disproportionate representation in the Senate and the House. So going back to Trump trying to push back his criminal trials, those appeals would arrive at a time when the Supreme Court remains under scrutiny for decisions on abortion, affirmative action, LGBTQ plus rights, and other issues that divide Americans. At the same time, the High Court is keen to avoid the appearance of engaging in politics and has repeatedly shot down other appeals from Trump. But whether those efforts are ultimately successful may be beside the point. The former president has a long history with long-shot appeals as a part of the strategy of delay. And they point out some of the issues that can be appealed. The former president is widely expected to ask a federal court to take over the Georgia case, largely because many believe his lawyers could build a more conservative jury that way. President Joe Biden won Fulton County with 73% of the vote in 2020. And I would add, probably, since that has the largest chance, and especially given his recent behavior of being threatening in defiance of the judge, the best chance of him getting clamped in a jail cell, and if he only got that for 5 minutes, it would probably break him in half. He probably wants to avoid that by getting federal court or anyone to intervene. And I think, well, I'll go on this in a minute, but it seems to me that the man is just obviously, he's looking desperate. He must surely be desperate because he's got, in terms of actual fact to refute the charges against him, he's got nothing. Trump made the same request in New York, where he faces a 34-count indictment from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. A U.S. District Judge denied the request last month, and the former president appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. That decision, wherever it lands, could be appealed to the Supreme Court. A filing in federal court this week by Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, may well serve as the template. Meadows was charged in the Fulton County case for his role in allegedly pressuring Georgia state officials with false election fraud claims. Meadows attempting to remove his case to federal court and have it dismissed. Federal law allows U.S. officials to move their cases to federal court if they're fighting state charges over actions related to their work for the federal government. And they give an example. It goes back to 1890. But the problem with this is that what Meadows and what Trump were doing was not working for the federal government. They're creating crimes in order to get reelected to the federal government. And I suspect that any but the most blindly loyal judge, unfortunately there are some of those, will rule against that pretty quickly. But still, just taking it to them allows a certain amount of delay. It's one of those things that people with a lot of money manage to do, even when they are charged with horrific crimes. Very rich murderers, you may have noticed, are able to delay and confuse and confiscate their trials for years and years, sometimes until they pass away and are never forced to do a day in court. Do a day in prison, I mean. So Trump, like Meadows, may try to convince a court that the actions he took in Georgia were done in his capacity as a president. If a lower court rules on that argument, the losing side will likely ask a federal appeals court to review it. So you see how that works. I mean, I just said that it's unlikely to prevail, but they did get their day in court, so that will delay things. Yeah. So, lying and pressuring Georgia officials. The question is, what does the Trump indictment accuse his associates of doing? Trump is going to argue, Eric Siegel predicts, a law professor at Georgia State University, says Trump is going to argue that he and all his merry people were simply ensuring the integrity and fairness of federal elections, something they had an obligation to do, and therefore he has immunity. And that, I don't even have to tell you that's not going to wash. But it started when Trump was even still president. Back in July 2020, the court ruled that Trump could not keep his tax returns and financial records away from New York prosecutors. And we know just how successful he was in delaying that. It never affected his presidency. His tax returns were not made available until after his presidency. So in the case of Trump's tax returns, Democrats on the House Ways and Means Committee sued for the documents in 2019 when Trump was still president. By the time the case wended its way through the federal court system, he had been out of the White House for nearly 2 years. So there are more details on that. But as it stands now, judges have set trial dates in 2 Trump cases for March and May. Prosecutors in the other 2 cases are seeking trial dates in January and within 6 months. Special counsel Jack Smith is seeking a January 2nd start date for the case in which Trump is accused of conspiring to steal the 2020 election from President Joe Biden. And that's the one that I'll really be watching. I think the Georgia case is very interesting because so much work has been done for so long by a blazingly competent woman. And it is in a county that will not look kindly on his assumption that he should walk scot-free no matter what. But Jack Smith is also very hard-headed, has put his case together, and has dialed it down just to Trump, so it doesn't get tied up in the ins and outs of a broad conspiracy. Trump attorneys oppose that January 2nd start date, which is less than 2 weeks before the Iowa caucuses open the Republican nominating process. The former president who is running for election again has already called for all 4 criminal trials he is facing to be delayed until after the November 2024 election, claiming that the criminal prosecutions are politically motivated to undermine his bid for the White House. And when I read that, I think, well, I certainly desperately hope that it undermines his bid for the White House. Can't imagine that thug getting in again, but then I couldn't imagine the thug getting in the first place. So we have a problem with some Americans who think that up is down and blue is green, and putting evil people in the White House is a great idea. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan will definitely set the schedule for the trial. She has not announced one, but Trump's recent attacks against her on Truth Social may get him a speedier trial than he'd like. She said, I intend to ensure the orderly administration of justice in this case as I would with any other case. The more a party makes inflammatory statements. What are you doing, Doug?
Carry on. You just carry on. And I'll just
with that.
Carry on.
He just has this, no matter what mattress he gets, he has this urge to tear it apart. And then he looks so forlorn. It's like, oh, my mattress, it's been torn.
Hey, baby.
It's not as good.
Hey, baby.
You don't want to lay down. He's busy tearing apart the mattress. He's getting his mattress tearing on. Anyway.
Darling one, I'm attempting to deal with the dog, so you can deal with the landscape.
Yes, thank you very much. I will deal with Trump's tearing. Let's see. The more a party makes inflammatory statements, she said, about this case, which would taint the jury pool or intimidate potential witnesses, the greater the urgency would be that we proceed to the trial to ensure a jury pool from which we can select an impartial jury, which is certainly a good point. And I think that Trump, in his mob ways, may have thought that he would be able to say what he said. If you come after me, I'll come after you, and then say that, oh, it's such a vague statement. But it's not a vague statement because it's coming in the context of all the trials that are coming after him. And what he's saying is that he wants his supporters to
You're fine.
you're okay to actually back him, possibly in violent ways. And Ross Story says that one of the things that Trump cannot tolerate is feeling powerless or helpless. Quoting Dr. Mark Goldston, he said, "That is the rage, impotent rage. That is the rage of powerlessness. And the more powerless and more imperiled he feels, the greater his rage. As these feelings worsen in Trump with the indictments piling up, it compels him to, quote, destroy Biden just as equally. And he is currently staking his entire future on being able to be reelected and shutting down all the investigations against him, even though as president, he couldn't actually shut down the Georgia election case, and under state law, couldn't get a governor to pardon him." So I think that what Trump has been saying shows his strategy, his unbelievably almost desperate strategy to either provoke something approaching a civil war in the United States, to put him in, to have a coup and put him in by violence, or to just confuse the system so greatly that he can somehow skate. But his rage may win out. And I would like to point out that many commentators, there'll be commenters who are also taters, have said that the January 6th, I know, as long as they're not dictators, they've said that, they pointed out that January 6th was a trial run. Of course it was. All failed coups are trial runs historically. This is something you can trace in the history of coups across the world. If the coup fails and the people who instigated the coup are not either killed or put away, and I'm not saying kill them or put them away, I'm just saying this is what happens, they will try again. Partly because the first coup puts them in desperate danger of being prosecuted.
Well,
right?
And I do think you're saying put them away.
Put them away.
Yeah, I mean, because they are dangerous, just as you're saying.
Yes, and I think they're a lot more dangerous than people realize. Over the years, I've noticed that whenever the U.S. gets ready to conduct an illegal imperial war, a true criminal act on a broad scale, there's a cadre of people even, or maybe especially on the left, to say, oh, they won't do that. They won't go that far, because you can't imagine it. And it's something that, plays around in my mind too. It's just like, oh, surely I'm paranoid about this. But I've learned that you have to face this pretty carefully. We really are in danger of some new attempt at a coup from Trump. I know I've been saying that for a while, but it's been building for a while. And I still think that
Well, he just, that's his fallback plan. That's what he has. He's the strong man, and he plays by mobster roles. That's who he is.
Yeah, and he can count. He knows he's not going to get the popular vote, and he's not going to get the electoral votes. So how's he going to get in? He has a plan, and it ain't democracy.
Right. Yeah, safe to say.
And he can't afford to not get in. And the Supreme Court just might decide, yeah, we want to side with him so that we never get called on the bullshit that we've been observed doing.
So one hand washing the other sort of situation.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I think that is some cause for concern. But again, the best antidote for that is to keep our eyes wide open and to use our voices.
I keep my eyes wide open all the time.
She never sleeps.
Close watch on this heart of mine.
Do you walk lines? Do you?
Not really.
Okay.
A little clumsy for that.
Is there anything else, my dear?
That pretty much concludes my rant for this morning. Thank you for listening.
And thank you all for your patience this morning, as we had an interesting false start. But here we are, and hopefully, we're reaching you. So, what do I have? Well, we are moving into this harvest season, and we are now in the waxing moon phase, which is a time of really putting out your intentions, knowing that there is reciprocity with the universe, that as we put out our intentions, we attract that kind of energy back into our lives. And even more so, some say that what we put out comes back to us 3 times over. I was thrift shopping with my family the other day. My family's been visiting from Mexico for a couple of weeks, and we've had many adventures and talked about many things. And one of those things is about choosing kindness. As I was thrift shopping, we found a T-shirt. I found a T-shirt that in fact says "Choosing to be kind" on it, and that sparked some good conversations about what kindness really is. And as we reflect love in action, as we reflect compassion and caring for each other, we choose kindness, and that is a position of strength. It comes from the center. It's not phony niceties. It's not toxic positivity. It is compassion in action. It is love in action. And that is what we need. So I am hoping to increase that kind of understanding and that kind of, deep heart-centered guidance through this harvest season, as we again put out our intentions and get back in kind. And I would like to choose kindness and to grow kindness and compassion in my life, in our community, in our region, in our country, in our world. So there's my sort of thoughts on where we are moon-wise and season-wise. And here's what we have for tarot-wise. We have the Knight of Cups. We have the Eight of Swords inversed. And we have the the Knight of Wands inversed. Sorry, Page of Wands inversed. I can't read upside down with a glare on it. How's that work? Okay. So what does this all mean? It means we might have kind of been spinning our wheels. There's been some busyness, some getting distracted about what really matters, being distracted by the shiny things, by the passing fancies, by the 150 billion ways to be in the world. Things have kind of pulled us off of course. It's likely that some of us feel kind of anxious, isolated, kind of maybe painted into our own corners. And the only way to undo that is to just gently start backing up, right? And we do that with the Knight of Cups. The Eight of Swords inversed really talks about the fact that um, we've kind of trapped ourselves in our own thoughts. We've trapped ourselves in our own ways of being. We might be experiencing repercussions of that, like being isolated, being overwhelmed with busyness because we didn't have good boundaries, being distracted with the next shiny thing and forgetting that we were moving towards a goal in our lives, whether that's building community or making a new move or whatever it is. And so what's our path out? Once we kind of trap ourselves, once we paint ourselves into a corner, what's our path out? The path out is the path with heart. Follow your heart in a very deep way. What I mean is, um, you know, far from being capricious, and sometimes people say follow your heart, and it kind of has this quality of do whatever, and it's not really, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying really check in to your feelings, and see where that guides you. If you're trying to get out of isolation and loneliness, check in to your heart, do your healing work, engage in that, with fullness of self, because that is the way out of isolation and loneliness. Developing true connections. And we do that through finding shared purpose, volunteering, or meeting neighbors, and coming up with very practical plans to help sustain your area, or however it is that we find people, and then making sure that you're staying true, centered, and speaking with kindness, and following your own intuitive, heart-centered feelings about what you need to do next. The path with heart is really about honoring yourself at a very deep level, and knowing that uh, what we have done we can undo, and it's always a good time to make amends, to say sorry, and to again put kindness and compassion into action, and live a life of love and heart centeredness. That's what I have.
All right, then.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we will, in fact, be back next week.
We'll be back next week, and we're very interested in your comments. So fire away, and don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and we'll just keep spreading it.
And please do leave your comments below. Let us know. Let us know what you're thinking about these items, and also let us know what you would like us to talk about in the future. That's always a good idea. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
Our love goes out to you and to all of the ships at sea. Bye bye.